and what's happening there right now with where he stands on his approval rating, to what's happening with the health care plan, to what's happening with Russia, to what's happening with the midterms, and the fact that there is still a very strong core support for this president right now. Where we go, we'll talk about national media politics this morning, as well as opening it up and getting more into some of the local. You know, there was an interesting article in the paper this past weekend talking about how Senator Bob Corker, you know, goes both ways and is sometimes critical and sometimes supportive, but that he has the president's ear. What does that mean, you know? So it's always nice if you have one of your own local senators having some sway with the president of the United States. So what we'll do is put the number up, 737-7587. If you want to join in the conversation as we talk about what we see happening, you're welcome to do so. The lines are open. But let me introduce our guest this morning. He is Dean of the Honors College at MTSU, Political Science Professor John Weil. Good morning.
Good to be here.
Love the linen jacket.
Thank you.
Love it, love it, love it.
It's summer.
Man, you're dressing for the weather. Well, listen, a lot going on right now, as always. It's always interesting. I think it's this latest poll that just came out, and whether or not it's accurate or not, is giving the president, what, a 36 to 39% approval rating, which they're saying may be the lowest of any president after 6 months of his presidency in the 70 years, past 70 years.
Well, in the 70 years is basically when they began scientific polling.
Really,
so,
what does that mean? I mean, polls going into the presidential election were obviously wrong, and now this throwing out...
I'm going to say, you know, what does it mean? Ask Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, what does it mean? I mean, and it doesn't seem to bother President Trump all that much. You know, he's like, not bad, near 40% this time in, you know?
Well, you know, when you measure public opinion, you have to measure not only percentages, you also have to measure what they call intensity.
Okay.
And it appears as though Trump supporters are still, for the most part, intensely loyal.
I agree.
Now, what I think may be happening is you do need to remember that the Republican Party is a minority party, particularly given the number of independents. And to the extent that some of the independent base may be eroding, that could be a bad sign. You know, 2018 we'll have the midterm elections.
You're right.
So, you know, we'll get sort of a sense. Almost always the president's party loses in the first midterm election, and that'll probably happen. But if it were to go more than usual, then that would be a sign that, you know, maybe his own would desert him. We'll see.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I still believe that among his core supporters, there's still. I mean, I'm to the point where there is a group, probably smaller than just the core, but just the real rabid ones, that, well, there was a big, we were just talking about the article in the Tennessean last week where they went, I think it was to Wayne County, that was very heavily Republican and Donald Trump, and the chairperson of the Republican Party in that county said, yeah, I still very much support Donald Trump, and really I will continue to support him unless I were to witness him gunning someone down in the cold blood in the middle of the street. So that's the threshold.
They're the kind of supporters you long for.
That's the kind of support that scares me. I don't care whether you support Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, or someone else, but if the only things that sway you from supporting an individual is you witnessing them commit first-degree murder, I think you have a problem. And when I hear those kind of comments, I'm like, wait a second, you have got to be kidding me. If that's the case, it just doesn't matter anymore.
But I don't think you would find a typical member of Congress saying that.
Oh, yeah, this was a supporter, and I'm like, hopefully she was being hyperbolic there, but it's just like, come on, are you serious? Your bar is that low that you'll support anything except first-degree murder? Well, come on.
Well, and you know, we don't have a parliamentary system. In a parliamentary system, if you had this low of support, you might get a vote of no confidence in Parliament, and you would have another election. We don't have that, so that gives presidents a little bit of time. If you remember, in fact, John Kennedy was fairly early in his administration. He took a fairly fatal, messed up with the Cuban Missile thing, and there have been other presidents, but they seem to rebound, and there was a recent editorial on this, they seem to learn a little bit more from their mistakes more quickly than the Trump team seems to be doing.
Still early in his...
It is. 6 months.
Yeah, it's just 6 months in is what he's been doing. And in fairness, too, now maybe it's been closer than anyone suspected, but there were some special elections for some congressional seats.
There were, and he's gotten all of them.
And he's won them all. Now, they were much closer in what were traditionally Republican strongholds like down in Atlanta, so that could be an indicator, but the bottom line is Republicans still won those seats.
They did.
So I don't know if there's anything to read into that going into...
I wouldn't pronounce extreme unction over him at this point.
No, not at all. How important is it to have them pass some type of health care reform, this third effort? And we know now that it's been put on hold, the vote.
For John
McCain, but it tells you how desperately they need John McCain's vote, and I'm not sure just how on board he is, even though I guess he said he'd vote for it.
They need 50 apparently to bring it up, back for debate. And, and they have 52. 2 senators have already declared against it. So the fact that he would be willing to consider it doesn't necessarily mean that he and there's close to a dozen others who they're getting when they have these town meetings, they're finding out that whatever trouble Obamacare has, and it has plenty. Yeah. But there are a lot of people who believe that their lives have been saved or their savings accounts have not been wiped out as a result of it. And traditionally in the United States, once you get a program, whether it's Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid or Obamacare, it's very difficult. You have a constituency built in there. And sometimes there are people who initially opposed it. Maybe doctors didn't originally like it, but now they know what the system is. They're used to getting the revenue from it. It has some stability to it, and it's much harder to cut than it is to start sometimes.
Well, and the president's promise during the campaign was that he was going to get rid of Obamacare and replace it. But I thought, replace it with a caveat with something better. Sure. And I think most everyone would be supportive of that. That was fair enough. And,
I agree.
And there is the problem now. You remember how long it took even to get Obamacare working, and it was never perfect.
And don't forget, before that, the Clintons, that was the initiative. That's what Hillary worked, assiduously on in the first year or two of the Clinton campaign, or Clinton presidency. So, presidents have been trying since Truman.
So, to
get this.
Right. And it took a lot of effort to do that. You don't just throw that out and get a new, better plan overnight. Right. It's been some time. But my take is I almost see two factions here. What appears to be presented, and we'll see what the Office of Budget reports back on it,
CBO.
But that they want to get rid of it. But the replacement seems like it's going to be worse. and so I see some of these senators saying, look, I'm not going to just vote for something to say we got rid of it if what we're replacing with is worse. Because if they're their constituents getting hammered by this, they're going to get voted out.
No, that's right.
And I don't, and frankly, I just don't like the idea of, well, we promised we're going to get rid of it, we're going to get rid of it regardless. That's silly. I want to know if what they're getting rid of it with is going to be replaced by something better. And no one seems convinced of that right now.
Well, and the Republicans themselves are split, and it's not unusual, but between those, conservatives, free market, as much choice as you can have, and then sort of the other, we got to care for everyone and make sure, the fact that the projection that 18 to 24 million less people may have health care insurance than previously had it, is certainly not encouraging. If the Republicans don't get it through, then maybe they'll have to do what originally was done, and you have to go back to both parties having some input, and maybe then we'll get something a little bit better.
Or maybe amend and change the existing thing. I'm just wondering, though, on the big picture, politically speaking, another failure a third time, if it doesn't happen, whatever on its superficial surface, another failed effort. You said last time you were on, something like this happens, and it can create a trend where all of a sudden then it's going to be much more difficult to work through tax reform or anything else. It would be a failure on one of the president's major promises during the campaign.
Sure. I think a lot of people, and of course, it's easy for pundits to sit here and tell the president what he should have done, but a lot of people think that if he had begun with tax reform, there's a greater consensus, at least among Republicans, to get that done than there seems to be in the direction to go for health care. So, I think, succeed or not, that looks like the next big initiative, and the caveat being, with North Korea and Iraq and Iran and powers like that in the world, we could always end up, being sidetracked. Franklin Roosevelt started with the New Deal, and about midway through his administration, he said, "I'm now going to become," I don't know if it was Dr. War, but basically, I'm going to switch attention from taking care of internal to we have this threat from abroad.
Yeah.
And that's always a possibility in a presidency.
All right, listen, we'll take a break on that note. We have some calls coming in. If you're on hold, stay where you are. The number is 737-7587. Your observations on that or more. We also haven't talked about Bob Corker yet, or the effect here in the state of Tennessee with regard. And of course, Tennessee went very heavily for Donald Trump as well.
Then we got a governor's election coming up.
And we have a governor's election with some developments over the weekend, as a matter of fact, with one person kind of falling out, being chosen for a judgeship, and another one that many of you know, Beth Harwell, jumping in. We'll take a break. When we come back, more of your calls with our professor, John Weil from MTSU, right after this.